Hey folks, in today's video, we're going to talk about what to do when you have a tenant ready to move in. Things you need to provide them, little tips that are going to make their lives easier, which in turn makes your life easier. And we're going to go through a little bit of a list here. By no means is this an exhaustive list, but it is a really good start, and some of these are mandatory that you have to do. So I got a little list here, so pardon me for reading at times. So this is going to be a bit more Ontario specific. So the Landlord Tenant Board is what it's called in Ontario, that manages the relationship between landlords and tenants. In different provinces or states, you'll have some sort of body that governs these things or that manages these things, but it'll be pretty similar. So we'll use it as a generic example, but again, you can research it online for your specific province or state. The first thing you need to provide is the Landlord Tenant Board has an information package for new tenants. It sort of describes their rights. It tells them what landlords are and are not allowed to do. And in Ontario, we're actually required to provide this list to new tenants. So go on the LTB or Landlord Tenant Board website, super easy to find, tenant checklist, and then you can give it to the tenant on day one or before. The second thing is a copy of the lease. In Ontario, we are required to provide the tenant with a copy of the lease, a signed copy of the lease within about 30 days. If you do not provide it, they can actually stop paying rent until you provide that signed copy. Now, they'll have to pay that rent back eventually, but there is a rule that tenants don't have to pay if the landlord has not given them a copy of the signed lease within a certain time period. So just make sure you're doing that, get it out of the way, and forget about it. Super easy to do, but make sure you provide a copy. You also need to go through with a form with the tenant, either before they move in or on the day they move in, and walk around the unit and notice any deficiencies, any scratches, any marks on the wall, things that they are moving in with already there. So at the end of their lease, you do a final walkthrough with them, and you can go through and say, okay, this was here before, but this wasn't here before. This is damage you've caused, and then you can hold them accountable for that. It's super important to do this walkthrough so there's no confusion later about what happened and when it happened and who did it. And that way you can avoid a lot of headaches, and you can know what they're responsible for paying for, or what's just sort of, normal wear and tear. The next thing you need to do is provide them and show them when you're doing that walkthrough where the smoke alarms are, how to make sure that they're in working order, and let them know they're not allowed to tamper with it. They're not allowed to touch it or do anything unless you've given them consent to do so. Changing the batteries, you could have the tenant do it. It's a really good idea for you as a landlord to get into your unit, or the property manager to get into the unit, change the batteries, and just sort of, look around, see how the unit's doing, how clean they are. If there's any damage already, you can sort of address it at that time. But you are required to have a smoke alarm on each level of the property. So if there's multiple levels, each level has to have it. Usually in a hallway outside of bedrooms is sufficient. Different layouts will require different things. So make sure you double check, because it is your responsibility as the landlord to have them in the proper areas. They have to be in working order. So make sure you double check. On a similar note, you should provide fire extinguishers for them, and in your walkthrough, show them exactly where it is, demonstrate how to use it, make sure they haven't expired. Just keep track of them, sort of put it in your phone or something as a reminder to double check the condition of them, or to replace them when they expire, and fire extinguishers do expire. So just make sure you're on top of that. The next thing is the carbon monoxide detector and the location of it. If you have a gas burning appliance of any kind, gas furnace or whatever, you must have a carbon monoxide detector by law. So make sure it's working, make sure if it's battery operated, batteries are being changed every so often, or it's plugged in properly, it's in the proper location. Again, super easy to find this information online, but it is your responsibility as the landlord to have one, to make sure it's in working order. Otherwise, it'll be on you if something goes wrong, and nobody wants that for anyone, and you don't want that responsibility, never mind the tenant's safety. You want to have keys available for the tenant on the day they move in. It's advisable to change the locks or change the keys in that lock every time a tenant moves out. Now, you don't have to get the locks changed by a locksmith every time there's tenant turnover. There are locks now that are available where you put in it's called a smart key, and you put it in a little hole in the lock, and then you can actually change the key used for that lock every time. Keys can cost you $10 to $15. A locksmith coming in and changing the actual lock's gonna be a lot more expensive than that. So you might wanna invest in these smart key locks where every time the tenant changes over, you can actually change the key used for the exact same lock. And then that way you're spending so much less money, you have a lot more control over it, and you're not waiting on someone making appointments depending how close you live to the property. It could be a bit annoying. So kind of look into that. But again, make sure they have enough keys for the number of people living in there. Some of our properties, we put a lockbox on the outside somewhere, hidden away. And that way, if the tenant locks themselves out, we can give them the code to the lockbox. Instead of making the trip to the property, they can just access the key, and then we figure out what to do going forward from there. We always like to provide our tenants with a list of emergency contacts. So plumbers, electricians, sort of emergency things that'll happen in the middle of the night where you don't want to get that call at 3 a.m, and then you have to go through and call the electrician, call the plumber, call whoever you need to. They have that list maybe on the fridge, we like to put it, or we put it, somewhere in an easy to spot location so they can make that call in the case of an emergency. Now, if it's something that doesn't need immediate assistance, then yeah, they can call you or get in touch with the property manager. But there are certain instances, like if there's water gushing out of the faucet, you don't want the extra time that it's going to take for them to call you, call the plumber, explain it. Maybe you have to give a detail. You got to call the tenant back, just get it over with, call the plumber, get it done. So having a list of the emergency contacts, maybe local hospital numbers or locations, local taxi numbers. We like to provide everything they might need in a moment of panic. So it's nice and easy. They go to one location and they can actually, take care of themselves to a certain extent, make sure they're okay or the property's okay without taking time and delaying what needs to be done immediately. I also like to provide a schedule of the garbage, recycling, and compost pickup. So someone moving to a new area, it's kind of a nice thing to do for them. It's like someone was going to an Airbnb for a week. You have the list of how things work and what the schedule they work on. It's great to do that for your tenants. It's sort of stepping in the right direction or getting off on the right foot with them, establishing a relationship that you're looking out for their best interests and you understand what they need, and just easily providing a list, easy peasy, move on to the next. The next thing is garbage bins. You need to make sure they have a garbage, recycling, and compost bin. You can usually pick this up from the local municipality. Some of them give them free, some of them, small amount for the actual bins. You want to show your tenants where they move in, where it is, the days they need to put it out. Put a schedule on the fridge for them, or put it in like a nice, laminated package or something so they can have access to it and put it wherever they need, or if they think they're gonna be able to see it, and that way they're not missing a garbage pickup and then garbage just to pile up, and that's a whole nother issue. And finally, we like to do a welcome gift. Just a little something. It could be like a little, $5 tree that sits on the windowsill, or a box of chocolates, or a gift card to a coffee shop or whatever. Just, again, you want to start off on the right foot. You want to know that the tenants are taken care of, and they want to feel as if, okay, my landlord actually cares. This is not just rinse and repeat, taking my money and don't even care what happens to me. It's just a great way to start off on a good foot. Your relationship with your tenants goes a long way toward your experience with your property. Although the money could be rolling in, it really does make a difference if your tenants are happy. They'll call you less. They might look the other way if there's a small issue. They might give you a heads up or tell you about maybe the neighboring tenant they're having issues with, or something the neighboring tenant is doing, because they have a good relationship with you. We've had tenants call us about little things, big things that are so important only because we have a good relationship and they feel like they can reach out, and we're not just a faceless landlord, collecting checks every month. That relationship does go a long way. Again, this is not an exhaustive list, but these are important things to make sure you do, to maybe do just to make your relationship better. We highly recommend all of them. If you have any questions, by all means, reach out, openbookinvestors.ca. If you got value out of this video, click the like and subscribe button below, hit the notification bell so more people get this kind of video and so you don't miss any more content like this.